Alex Gluz here. I'm the host of Revenue Engine podcast, where I talk with top leaders in business, marketing, sales tax, SaaS, and more. We have a great guest for you today. This episode is brought to you by TA Monroe Digital. At TA Monroe, we build world-class revenue engines for B2B SaaS companies. Derek, what that means is we do everything behind the scenes to generate you tons of qualified leads, opportunities, and customers. We build highly effective marketing systems and scale them profitably through our demand generation strategies. We think scientifically on how to scale your demand and revenue. We bring decades of experience and expertise. Email me at alex@tamonroe.com or visit tamonroe.com today to schedule a strategy session, learn more about our mission. We have a great guest for you today. Super excited. Hey, Derek, nice to have you here.
Alex, it's good to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
So can you do a brief intro of who you are and what you do?
Sure. I'm Derek Weeks. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer at a company called Katalon. We are in this automated software testing space. And I've been in marketing and B2B SaaS companies for the past 30 years. It is a role that I love. I love the levers that you can pull to try to generate and capture demand in a market. And part of that is, especially in B2B startups, how do you get attention in a market when you're really small, have no money, need to be scrappy, and no one's ever heard of you? But I think that's like one of the puzzles and challenges that I like to solve in my career. And I've worked all over the place. So while I'm based in the US now, I've lived in Europe and worked internationally for many years. Katalon itself has a large office and presence in Vietnam as well as India. So I'm used to marketing on a global scale as well. And I'm kind of data and demand gen guy, in addition to some old product marketing chops.
So I would like to know what it took to build a community of more than 100,000 professionals. Can you walk us through how you started and what was the first thing you did to make it all come together?
Yeah, so community building is certainly part of the arsenal of things that I bring into a marketing organization. Today at Katalon, we have a community. I looked earlier in the week or last week, we have 117,000 members in our product community. When I started at Katalon about a year and a half ago, it was somewhere in the 60,000 range. So we've grown that community tremendously over time. But probably the story that you're referencing with the 100,000 is an earlier community that I started called All Day DevOps. I started it with a colleague of mine, Mark Miller, when we were at a company called Sonotype. We were in a space that in IT and software development realms called DevOps. It was about a movement about effectively how you could develop software at higher velocity and how you could go from companies like Microsoft that released a new version of Windows every year and a half to companies like Amazon that have 100,000 releases of software changes a day, and it was how to make that kind of migration. So there was a lot of interest in the tech community around this movement, and to figure it out, you had to go to these conferences in person, meet other people, and hear the speakers at those events. But it was kind of very selective on only a couple hundred people could go to the largest events at the time in DevOps. And it cost a lot, and you'd need travel budget and hotel budget and conference fee budget and all of that. And we had been to enough of these things that we said, I think there's a missing part of the market that's not being addressed. So we kind of looked at our product market fit and said, the in-person regional or local events and conferences are happening, but there's global learning that there is a learning base or a community that wants to learn on a global scale that is not yet being served. And I think we can put what we're seeing in person online. This was back in 2016. We're going to have an online conference for DevOps, teach people about it, invite them into a community that was Slack-based as well as other kind of online forum environments. And we did something really bold. We said, we're going to go online. We're not going to allow any vendor pitches. This is going to be free. Because it's online, anyone can access it. And we are going to run this for 15 hours straight online. And during COVID, people tried to do this, like, how do we move our physical events online? So we were 4 or 5 years before that doing an online event that no one was thinking of doing things at scale. And from the beginning of that idea to execution was about 90 days to put the event together. We had 5 other friends in the industry that helped us. And that event went from, and community associated with it, went from 0 to 13,000 in the first 90 days, because there were so many people thirsting for that knowledge. And because of the format that we used, we were online, totally accessible. We were free. There weren't vendor pitches. And as a result, we were helpful. We just invited practitioners into this forum. We provided a stage. They provided, the community provided the content. Here's what I've done. Here's what was innovative. Here's what was new. Here's a challenge that I overcame. Here's a niche within this realm that not many people have explored, and people appreciated that helpfulness. And with that, we knew we were onto something. We decided to repeat the annual conference the next year, but we kind of built a following of people that were energized about learning about this topic and becoming better DevOps professionals. The next year we had 33,000 people participate in this. And over the years, there were 30 to 40,000 people a year that went to this online conference, but it grew into a community of over 100,000 people in the DevOps community. And the key thing about that was we were aiming to be helpful. We weren't aiming to sell anything. We weren't on there saying, hey, now that you've come to this community and it was helpful and we promise no vendor pitches, the same day or the very next day saying, oh, let me tell you about my company and my products and all the stuff that I have to pitch you. We were very protective about how we followed up with that community to not break the brand promise that we offered them that came in.
You talked about blending product, brand, and community marketing. How do you balance all of this, and how did they work together to create something that lasts?
Yeah, I think it's, I look at these as intertwined, that if you can have a community of interest that has nothing to do with your products at all. It's just in the space. So if we're marketers, right, we have a community of interest around marketing. It might be a community of interest around CMOs that, like, every Friday morning, I'm in a community of interest around CMOs that gather, right? It might be a community of interest around DevOps or, cooking or something like that, just depending on what your business is. But it could be a community tied to your product. I think as a CMO, I think about how do we connect community and brand and product? You'll often hear in the CMO realm about who your buyers are and how many of those buyers are in the market, right? And often it's said that 95% of the people out there that are doing research are not in the market today. They're not ready to buy anything from any vendor, right? But they're creating, their knowledge base and figuring out who do I need to pay attention to and follow and who's being helpful along the way. So where you have the 5% of buyers, you really need to be able to find those as a marketing team and give them something of value that says your product is differentiated enough to pay attention to. But because the marketing shouldn't only focus on the 5%, because the 5% are in market today, and you need to create the brand affinity with people that will be in the market in the future. So community is one of those things to partner, if you will, with the kind of product go-to-market motions, because community is the helpful notion, And it is being helpful in getting attention for your brand, whether it's a product community or community of interest, to say, we're going to go out and help people. We're going to give them helpful information about technology, people, processes, things in the market. And if we can do that enough, then we build trust with that community. And when it comes time that they're in the market to buy something, when they transition from the 95% to the 5% that's in market to buy, we get a seat at the table, right? So this community that I mentioned, every Friday morning, I'm in a community called CMO Coffee Talk. It's led by, the backing of it is a company, two companies, Heinz Marketing and 6 Sense in the marketing space. I've never bought their products, right? But as a CMO, when I'm in the market to buy the product or service that those community leaders offer, I will absolutely provide them a seat at the table. They're already on my short list, right? When I participate in this community every Friday morning, which I have for 4 or 5 years now, right? They never pitch. There's never part of that community that they're like, hey, let us remind you who we are and what we offer and what we sell. Like, I know where to find these people. They're in my community. They're in my tribe, right? And so that building trust with the market that you're in plays a really important part. And you can, if you build community to support that helpful path to market, it will help you down the line better understand what's happening with or who the potential buyers are. The other thing that I can tell you that is a fascinating part of communities at scale, when you get up to 100,000 people in a community, is even if all those people aren't buyers, right? If it's a product community, then they're a buyer because they've already used your product or bought your product, right? But the data behind that community, who are they? Where do they live? What titles do they have? What kind of experience do they have? Are there different growth areas? What are their interest areas, right? How are those interests changing over time? If you want to go out and understand your market, you can often, as a marketer, we all know this, pay someone who has a list or access to an industry or a community to say, we want to glom onto your data and your audience to learn more about the market. If you build your own community, then you actually have a massive amount of data about what's happening in a market that you can leverage in your go-to-market strategies. I know what the market is. I know what their interests are. I know who they are. I can better define the ICP. I know what parts of the market are growing. And I can then better target the people that are in market buying the products or services that I'm offering today.
When you are starting a community-led marketing effort, so how much time and budget should CMOs realistically expect to dedicate?
Yeah, I'm going to be very, very transparent and honest with you and all the listeners. Is generally, community is not a big investment in a marketing budget. It might run 5 to 10%, right? 5% to start with. You need a couple of good people that are good at interacting with others and being helpful and kind of working and building the relationships that are required to have the community flourish. Right? It doesn't need to be a gigantic program that we find 20, 30, 50 people to staff within what we're doing. When if we go back to the story of All Day DevOps, when we were running that at scale, like an annual conference in a community that was bringing 30 to 40,000 people a year, I mean, you might think we had a team of like 50 people running that. And you know what? The team running it was like 2.5 people part-time, right? We all had other jobs. No one had a full-time job at our company on that thing. it was all part-time effort, right? And the thing that we were doing, and it's an important part of the value of community. And I talked to my current community team at Katalon about this, is we had, with All Day DevOps, we created the forum. We built the stage for the community to share their information upon. But all of the content and value that was exchanged there was not created by us. We had 180 speakers a year come through and deliver 180 presentations over a 24-hour period online that were, delivered live, they were recorded. They created the content. We didn't create the content at all. We just created the stage. Creating the stage takes a lot less effort than creating the content. If you ask me, like, how big a team would I need to create 180 pieces of thoughtful industry content in 24 hours, it would be a massive team and a massive investment, right? But the community helps you build the content in on a very small one-to-one scale way. That's exactly what the podcast is today, right? You're not creating the content. The guest that you have is creating the content, but you have the stage that you're inviting the guests onto, right? So the user-generated content is the leverage point of community, which, if you're running it at scale, I have a really small community team at Katalon that is in charge of this 117,000 person community. But the value that they're creating is they're the stage. And if you think about those scenarios we were just talking about in community, we figured out a way with community to lower the cost of us doing marketing, that we could reach out to a big community. We could be helpful by creating a forum, and they could create content, and the content is really helpful. And by the way, we host the content as well, right? That lowers our cost of content development, we have a whole lot more content at lower cost. That lowers our customer acquisition cost in that realm. And then I think there's a lot of work that goes into it, and this is people, practice, process, technology, of how do you give people the experience that they want, right? Not the experience that you've designed, but really to be incredibly empathetic to your audience. How many clicks do they want to go through to get something? What did you give them in an experience that paid off? How much work did you make them go through to get it, right? And I think that by being maniacal about that user experience, and especially in a world like I live in, we do a lot of digital first marketing experiences. What is the experience that you give people that gives them the result that they were looking for? And sometimes people just kind of put something out there because they had an assignment, and we put something out there, and it makes the user go through way too many steps, and it frustrates them. And those more steps frustrate the people. It negatively impacts your brand. It increases your customer acquisition cost because people are frustrated going through the experience. We have a lot of conversations internally about what is the experience that we built. Is it logical? Is it efficient for people to go through that? And the other thing is, I'll tell you, one of my pet peeves as a CMO and marketing leader for years is in-person events. And part of the customer acquisition costs and keeping those down is understanding where you perform and where you don't perform. In some businesses, we invest in big priced events and show up with a big presence, and we take over the entire event. And you'd almost think it was our event. We had such a magical, like, integrated visibility through that whole event. And that worked really well for that particular company. Other companies I've been to where, you know, I'm in charge of events, or I have an event team, and they're like, we need to go to this event because everyone else is going to this event. And we go to the event and we scan 500 people and people love us, and isn't that great? But it actually turns out that, you know, you get 10 MQLs off those 500 scans, you get 1 SQL off those 500 scans, you get no deals off of those 500 scans, because it's not really the right audience that we're trying to sell to. And people try to show up there and make excuses about, well, we're doing it for the brand. It's like, no, we're actually trying to make more than $1 for every dollar we spend, right? And you have to look at the performance of your marketing results and what you choose to spend money on, and be honest with yourself about what's working and what's not.
For our listeners, if you'd like to learn more about how we can help you build marketing revenue engines that empower growth, visit TM Monroe or contact me on LinkedIn as well. All right, Derek, thanks so much.
Thanks, Alex.